Welcome to Simplify SQL Server Job Monitoring Management, sponsored by IDERA. I'm Greg Robidoux, host for today's webcast. Our speaker today is Bullet Manali, who is the Director of Sales Engineering at IDERA. During the webcast, we encourage you to ask questions. To ask a question, enter your question in the question area in your presentation controls, and we'll answer as many questions as possible during today's webcast. So at this time, I'm going to turn things over to Bullet, and he can get started.
Well, thank you, Greg. Yeah, let's get going. I want to talk. We're going to talk about SQL Enterprise Job Manager today. It's one of the products obviously related to the SQL Server agent and jobs within SQL Server. It also helps with the Windows task events as well. So if you have at the operating system level tasks, events, then we can also manage those with this product. But I'll do a few slides first, and then we'll kind of kick things off and go into the product and show you that a little bit, talk about the architecture as well, and I think what we'll kind of try to do is go through this and talk about various use cases and a lot of the challenges that most DBAs face in terms of jobs, and kind of show you how this tool can help in terms of making you more efficient and just making it easier to be able to understand what's going on in the way of jobs, as well as making your jobs themselves more efficient. So with that said, without further ado, let's go ahead and kick it off. So what is this product going to help with? And in terms of this topic, obviously, we're talking about jobs. Having a way to be able to visualize things centrally as opposed to one instance at a time. That's always been a big challenge when we're talking about jobs, and the fact that the jobs themselves, generally speaking, you have quite a few of them, and so getting a handle on them can be a challenge, especially if you just have the native capabilities available to you from a SQL perspective. So with that centralized view that you have, one of the things you'll be able to see is a calendar view, which is a little bit different than anything you have, obviously, with the native. And so this is almost taking kind of an Outlook calendar, but yet, kind of associating it to the jobs themselves. So you can see not only the jobs of a specific instance, but also to see the jobs that are tied to other instances on an overlapping calendar. So we're going to talk about that and show you that. And I think that that's definitely one of the areas that people like within the product. The other part of that calendar view, by the way, is its ability to be able to drag and drop. So if you have a scheduled job that's supposed to occur, in an hour, you need to push it, you can drag it to an hour past and just drop it, and the job can be left where it is in the new spot. So a lot of those kinds of things. Obviously you have the ability to create jobs with this product too, and that's not even really listed here, but it kind of goes without saying. One of the things you're going to see also with this that's real helpful is something called job chaining, and a challenge with a lot of database administrators is that they want to run their jobs, in some cases, after each job runs. So there's some type of precedence that needs to be set in terms of the jobs themselves, and a priority and an order, if you will. And a lot of times that can be difficult because if a situation occurs where a job runs long and you have another job that's supposed to kick off after it, the question becomes, when do I kick off that second job? What makes the most sense? And you have to kind of look at job history and figure out averages, and there's some things you can do, obviously, but being able to have some intelligence around the jobs themselves in terms of when they complete, what to do next, and being able to also have multiple jobs. And these, we're calling these in the tool as job chains, obviously, but being able to not only see that you have a job chain, if you will, but to be able to monitor and manage those job chains as a single entity. And I think that that also is really helpful in terms of what this, obviously, what this product is going to help you to do. The job chaining, like I said, is going to make life a lot easier for you, more efficient for you in terms of the time you have within your 24-hour time frame to run your jobs. If you're already having challenges around that from a window of time perspective, the job chaining is going to help. We're going to show you that. The other part, along with the chaining, that I think we see a lot of people using with this is the trending. So being able to understand based off of multiple jobs kicking off, and being able to understand what is the likelihood of that job taking longer or less time, understanding when failures are happening within the environment. Those kinds of things can be identified with the tool. And I think a big part also is just, generally speaking, the ability for you to take this information, and like I said, it's centrally being managed. And so from that standpoint, the alerts, which we're going to show you in a second as well, the ability to create and classify alerts that span multiple instances for multiple jobs, to be able to do alerting based off of, for example, job name very easily, or based off of the instance that the jobs they reside on. So a lot of control, and so most of these things I'm talking about really relate back to the filtering capabilities of this tool. And so we're going to show you that when we create the alerts, I can say I only want to create an alert for those jobs that have the name of production in the name of the job, for example, and making it really easy for you to do that. So that's something we'll talk about. Obviously the ability to view the histories, but to really leverage that data, we're going to show you that. Now all of this is done through a web interface, and so let's talk a little bit about the architecture, and then we're going to jump into the product. But I guess in terms of the actual architecture, it's pretty straightforward. You can see the instances on the right depict those instances that we're managing the jobs for. We do have a back-end repository, which only makes sense to be a SQL Server database, where we maintain all of the metadata and the associated job information. And the way we do that, and the way we collect that information, is through a centralized service, and that collection service will run on a regular basis for each of the instances, gathering the specific metadata related to your job activity into the jobs themselves. So you're always going to have an up-to-date view of the information as it relates to your job history, as well as those jobs that are scheduled to kick off. And we're going to walk you through some of that today. Now, most of this, everything I'm going to show you today is in our the IDERA dashboard, or the IDERA hub, if you want to call it that. You'll see that in that IDERA hub, we also have access to our other products within that dashboard, but just worth noting that's a Tomcat web service that's doling out those web pages for us, and so that all gets installed for you within the installation of the product. And you can have as many different consoles, obviously, since it's web-based, and each console you can have application permissions associated to it. So the good thing there is I can provide somebody, for example, a read-only view of the environment, or I can provide them with no access, or I can give them administrator rights, giving them the ability to create alerts within the tool and to do other things as well. So lots of flexibility, like I said, abilities to really get a handle on the jobs that span across multiple instances. So with that said, what we want to do is kick things off a little bit in terms of actually opening up the product and showing it to you. So the first thing I want to kind of do is just walk us or take us into the console. And I want to first kind of talk a little bit about some of the different tabs that you're going to see on the screen, and an explanation of some of this information. Now this is the dashboard, and on this particular screen we're going to see we have some different instances that we're managing. We also have quite a bit of the jobs that are being shown here. Now I'm going to talk about the filtering capabilities that you have, but I would be able to filter this in a number of different ways, even from this dashboard view. I'm also going to get a kind of consolidation of the areas where I might have alerts, either that I've created on my own or specific to job failures themselves, and I can see the details of that information. If I need to, I can start the job, I can dismiss it if I need to as well. Now, you'll see we have all these different tabs here, and what I want to kind of do is take a step over into the administration section and start with that first. The administration section is where we want to start, because I first want to talk about the ability to really kind of manage your jobs. If you are doing alerting and you do want to be proactive, you obviously have some of the capabilities of alerting based on the native jobs themselves. But when we talk about an environment that already has jobs out there, and we want to get a handle on some of that, these alert rules will allow us some ability to set some conditions that you wouldn't get if you're talking about using some of the native components. And so what I mean by that is I can create an alert rule, and we'll just call this my example of an alert. And so you'll see I can set the severity level of it, and so maybe I want to make this a critical type of an alert. I can alert on specific things at the job level, at the task level, the Windows task events, or the instance. So like if the instance in and of itself is not communicating, for example. But if we're talking about a job alert, we can do that, and this is the first step in creating an alert inside of Enterprise Manager's Job Manager. And what I'm going to do is just say this is an example. Whoops, helps if I can type. All right, and then we click on Next. And so here now we're setting up some of the configuration settings, in which case I could, if I wanted to, maybe I only want to specify alerts that are associated to my jobs with the word backup in it. So now I can use a wildcard, so anything with the word backup in it in the name of the job itself will be associated to the condition of this particular alert. And I can also narrow it down to specific instances if I want to, or exclude certain instances. And you'll see on a lot of these filters you have inclusionary or exclusionary options when you're doing this. I can do it based off of owner, category, duration itself, and also obviously in this case a lot of times you would want to do something like this where it was a failed, if it was a failed job or unknown. You can set up all different types of conditions. In our case, when I do this, I hit finish. So I've created an alert in this case, and that alert is right here, which is my example of an alert. Now, as a user of the tool, I have the ability to subscribe to this alert. And so you're going to see when we create these alerts, you have the ability to specify which ones you would want to be a member of in terms of receiving notification. So you have some ability to subscribe to those specific alerts. Now, the alerts can always be gone back to and edited and changed, and you can also filter. And you'll see all of the filtering for the product is done on the left side of the screen. So on most of these views, you're going to see that ability to filter. You'll also see consistently throughout the product the ability to export this data out. So if I say, hey, let's look at all of our alert rules in a PDF, we would be able to see what that looks like really easily, and I can provide that to my users as well. All right, so that's where we have in terms of the alerting components, and like I said, the ability to create those customized conditions really helps you to be a little bit more subjective about the types of alerts that you would want to receive. The other side of that is from a user perspective, like in my case I'm an administrator, but I could add another user. And then this would obviously give me the ability to specify different things in terms of my role, read-only, administer, user, those kinds of things. Now, if I go out and close out of this, and I'm back to the administration section, what I want to kind of do now is switch over and talk a little bit about if I were to add an instance. And I'm not going to add one, but I just want to show you what it looks like. When we add an instance, we can give it the name of the instance here. This is going to specify how long or how often we want to collect the data as it relates to your jobs. And so we can specify that as well as a retention of this data for each instance. You can specify what that retention would be as it relates to the data that we're collecting about the jobs. Obviously we have credentials, and you'll notice we have two sets of credentials where we can do SQL authentication, Windows authentication, but we'd also, you'll notice it's asking for WMI, and that's for the task events as well. So if we're managing instances as well as Windows task events, then we would be able to populate those other sets of credentials there. The information screen is just that. It's just metadata related to the instance, and it retains the information from previous instances that we've added. So I could go out and as I add a new instance, put that metadata back in or add new metadata to it, and then it'll be saved and be available the next time we add an instance. And then the maintenance. And so in terms of the maintenance itself, it's taking a second to populate, but you'll see that on this particular screen here, for this maintenance screen, you're going to have the ability to not only set up maintenance windows, but then specify what is to happen during those maintenance windows. What I mean by that is it possible that we do not want to get alerts during our maintenance window because of the fact that it's obviously maintenance? We would be able to set those kinds of things up. We could specify those jobs that are related to the maintenance schedule versus those that aren't, and alert only to those that are tied to the maintenance schedule. So you have some different options that are pretty unique there in terms of adding the instances. Now in my case, I've already added the instances, so I'm good to go there. All right, oops, yeah, someone cancel out. All right, and now what I'm going to kind of do is let's kind of step again to some of the other areas. Now obviously, as I mentioned before, we do have an ability to add and create new jobs. So there's nothing really significant here on this particular screen to show that's really that much different than creating a job natively. All of the options are going to be pretty much the same. So you can still create jobs as you normally would using all of the same kind of pieces of information that you would do in terms of creating a job. That can all be done here from within the console. But once you've done that and once you've created the actual jobs, then you have a number of different ways you can view that information. And I think that the first thing I like to talk about is just an ability to be able to filter the information you're seeing specific to whichever view you're in. So let's start with the jobs view itself. Here I have a listing of all of the jobs that are in my environment that I'm managing here. And mind you, I travel quite a bit, so I don't have a whole data center here to be monitoring, but the cool thing is that within the jobs view, as well as within some of these other views, you're going to have filters that you can apply to the view that you're in. So like in this view here, the schedule view, this is going to show me those jobs that have already run with color coding to signify the success or failure of those jobs, and here we can see a failure, as well as the areas or jobs that haven't kicked off yet. So we would be able to see the schedule for the things that have happened in the past as well as the things that are getting ready to happen. Now granted, if you've got a lot of jobs and a lot of instances, you're probably going to have a pretty mixed view here in terms of something like this that you have, where you have a lot of information. And I will tell you that in actually the next version of Job Manager, we're also doing some other things to kind of improve upon the filtering capabilities as well. But what I wanted to show you is that if I've already created a filter, then I can very quickly hone in on a specific view particular to what I've created in my filter. So here I've got a filter that I've created that basically is saying look at all of the jobs with the name that have the word human in the name of the job for all of the things related to human resources. In which case now that's exactly what it's going to show. And if I wanted to, I could also break it out by instance. Maybe I want to only show those jobs that are related to an instance that has the word Beeman Alley in the name of the instance itself. And so when I check that, you'll see that now it's only going to list those instances related to both the instance name as well as the job name. And so this is a filter, once again, that I could save and reuse, okay? Or what I could do, and what's, I can also create more than one view. So give it a second to update here. And so if I wanted to, I could go out and say, let's just go ahead and now let's do one for backups. Okay, and so probably helps if I spell the word backup correctly. And when I do that, we can see now all of the jobs that have the word backup in it. Now, I could do instances by the name. Maybe I have instances that all have the word prod for all my production instances. So I think you get the idea here of how we can very quickly hone in to those specific jobs that we're interested in. And it's not just by name of the job or job instance or instance itself, but also by status. Those that are scheduled. I want to see those that have failed. I want to see those that have been successful. So all these views we can very quickly update to see exactly what's going on. So I would show you that, from a scheduling perspective or for the scheduling standpoint, these are all really cool things to be able to do. And especially if you've got a lot of instances, I'm no longer having to go from one instance to another instance to another instance to try to figure out my strategy in terms of my jobs. All right, so that said, let's go ahead and switch over to this other view, the jobs view. All right, so we've shown you how you can have an ability to see only what you need to know. All right, we've talked about how you can create new jobs, and I just showed you that by clicking on the Add Job. But if I look at these jobs here, once again, I can filter. Now we're looking at it from a different type of view. We're not looking at just the schedule, if you will, with the calendar. And I forgot to show you, let me just back up real quickly here to the schedule. The one thing I would mention is you can drag these things that are scheduled to happen to different locations on the calendar. And so you would be able to move that job around. I'm not going to do it, but you could drag and drop that job, which is really nice if you want to move the job real quickly. You don't have to go into the properties of the job to do so. So if we go over to this jobs view, like I said, once again, we can still take advantage of filters, and we can have separate filters for jobs versus schedules. So if I wanted to create another filter, and in this case, do it based off of maybe those jobs that are performing actions that are executing, lots of status options, job names, enabled, disabled. All these are different filtering options. But the thing I wanted to kind of show you here is that when we're looking at these things, we can drill directly into the job, right? So if I click on a job in the jobs list, then it's going to take me and show me a kind of a calendar view once again. So it's a different kind of view there. But we would also see, in this case, the history associated to that job, which is pretty nice. And then even being able to drill down into that history to see the status of all the past executions as well, who is executed by, the duration, all that good stuff, right? So obviously real helpful in terms of that. So if we're drilling into the job, we see a job, we can identify when the job runs, we can see the history of the job. You'll notice over here on the right we have something called the Job Overlap Viewer. So here's the situation where I can take and hone in on job, and I can say I want to see if that job itself is going to conflict with any other jobs in terms of overlap. When this job is running, I want to know if any other jobs are going to be kicking off at the same time. Now I may just want to answer that question by itself, in and of itself. So all the jobs across my entire environment, I want to know which ones have overlap or have had overlap with, from a historical perspective, and be able to understand what that is. And that's exactly what we see here. We see the for that particular job, which in this case is this one right here, we can identify all of the times this job was running, or I should say scheduled to run, and when it is going to overlap, right? And so being able to understand that's really helpful. Now, I can also export that out to PDF. So on any job that you have where you need to do this kind of investigation, this kind of drill down to say, what are the jobs that are conflicting? Pretty easy to do that. But the other cool thing about it is maybe I only care about if it's conflicting when it's running on this instance and maybe not on this one. So once again, we could also specify and filter out further those instances that we would want to show the overlap for. Maybe I don't care for all these other instances, I just care for this one. And once again, really quickly, I can export that out to PDF. Just makes life a lot easier for me. All right, so you have that ability to create the jobs, view the jobs, filter the jobs, and also, like I said, identify and spot the overlap of the jobs, which is something that's not easy to do, especially if you have more than a handful of instances of SQL with a lot of jobs running on those instances. So since we're still here in this jobs view, let me go back to it. We can then also, I wanted to kind of show you, because we're collecting this information, we're gathering it, we're putting it in a repository, then it helps in terms of us being able to make sense of things in a much more efficient way. And the two things I'll point out to now are the job trending capabilities as well as the ability to create job chains. So when we talk about trending, we're leveraging that history of the associated jobs that we're managing. And I can click on job trend. Okay, and what this is going to help me to understand are those jobs, in this case, that are either longest running, the most frequent running jobs, the highest percentage of duration increase, the top failures. So any of these views, we would be able to see not only when they ran, in this case when they failed, but utilizing that historical information, we can also identify what the typical, what the trend looks like in terms of the job over a period of time. And we would be able to do this for days, months, even years. We can track these jobs. And we would be able to see and identify the trends. And once again, we can utilize these filters that we've created, and I can even save the filters here in this view and utilize them as well here. And so in our case here, we'll call this one backup. And we'll save that. So now I have this new filter that I've created. It's right here, and I can come back to this view at any given time and see it. I can see the longest running jobs, and so on and so forth. Some really neat stuff there. So good things that are available to us in terms of being able to view and spot things. Now, notice if I scroll down on this view, it's going to show me the jobs that are tied to what it is that we're viewing in terms of, in this case, I think it was job trends of longest running jobs, and then it'll show us those jobs themselves. And once again, we can drill directly into the job if we wanted to by clicking on it. you'd be able to do those kinds of things. And once again, to take me to a kind of a view of that job to where I can see it. And I can drill down into it and I can see all of those jobs. So it isolates it for me based off of the selections that I've made. So we've looked at the jobs, and also, by the way, the job history is a lot of this kind of information we've already seen here. Once again, filtering by backups, we can see that that's happening. Now, I'm going to take a step back over and talk about now job chaining. So when you talk about job chaining, if you've got 10 jobs and they need to run after one another, or maybe a few of them can run asynchronously. It's up to you, but if you were wanting to create those kinds of things, we have these things called job chains. So for example, on this one here, I could go out to it and I could say, let's go in and view the job chain designer. All right, and what this does is it actually helps us to understand where, or I should say, which jobs we're running. Now, not only can we chain the jobs together, but you're going to notice, and it might be hard to see with the presentation the way it is, but the text itself, these are running on different instances even. So I've got a job that might be kicking off on instance A, and when that job is complete, then the job chain knows to go and kick off instance B, but it won't do it until the first job has completed. But it's going to kick that other job off on SQL Server 02 as opposed to Beam and Alley VM1. So it'll allow you to create these flowcharts, if you will, to be able to go in and really make your jobs more efficient, so that when one quits, it's going to immediately kick off the next job in the job chain, and I don't have to try to figure out when it's going to end and give myself a buffer so that I know that it's going to be done, because sometimes it runs long. I don't have to worry about that. This handles that for me. And the way it works is you just simply drag the job that you would want to bring it in, and if I want to add another third level job here on the second step, we could do that. So it's going to say, okay, you want to add a job. How do you want this job to interact with the chain? Just adding it to the chain? Do you want to clone this job and create a new job with a different name? Do you want to add the job, keep it there, but disable it? And so you would be able to do any of those different options when you're creating these job chains. Whoops, that's not good. Sorry about that. It's a little bit of an exception there on my mouse wheel there. Okay. So, but what you would be able also in these job chains, and I want to show you, when we go into the job chain, and let's just go into this one here, and I'm going to go in, and I'm going to show you now when I go into edit the chain itself, the options that we have. So what you see is its ability now to specify the name of the job chain. The root job is the first job that's going to kick off when it runs, and then we can see in this case the alerts. Now the reason I show you this is when we create the alerts for the job chain, we can alert to the job chain itself in terms of its ability to execute the job chain or not as a whole. Or we can alert to specific jobs or the number of job failures within the job chain itself. And so I won't go through all of this, but you have a way to set some pretty specific conditions as it relates to either the chain or the jobs within the chain. So you can set these up by success or failure. You can set based on the duration, in other words, when this job chain is kicking off, when the alert would be active or not, job chain duration of greater than a certain amount, or percentage of the average chaining trend. So you get the idea. You have a lot of control over the alerting, and it's a much more powerful way to be able to manage your jobs as it relates to your success, failure, and looking at things in an aggregate, in terms of the function of the multiple jobs you have that might be performing a single function but take part in multiple jobs. So you have a lot of those abilities in terms of the job chains themselves to do that. So from a trending perspective, really helpful stuff. Jobs as well. Like I said, you have the ability to do a lot of the same things in terms of the Windows tasks that are available. So obviously that's important. And I think overall the ability to kind of go in and really have a handle on things is just really what this is all about. So hopefully this has been a helpful kind of overview of the Enterprise Manager, SQL Job Manager product. And I guess in terms of where you can play around with this if you want to try it out on your own. You can go out to the IDERA website, and I'll kind of pull that up here and show you where you would go out to play around with this yourself. If you got to the products section on the IDERA website, you'll have a link for, in this case, the Enterprise Job Manager, and this will allow you to go out and download that, and then where you would be able to obviously play around with this. I think it's a 14-day trial, and if you need some extra time with it, just give us a call, and we can help you out to give you a little bit more of a kind of a proof of concept on something like this. If anything, it's neat just to be able to go out, install this, and see what's out there. You know, when you start looking at these schedules and you start playing around with some of the filtering options, you really can get some pretty specific views into the environment that you might not have an ability to kind of go out and do very easily without a tool like this. So, like I said, the scheduling of the jobs and the job history, the ability to drag and drop, and the ability to really export any of this data that you see out for the most part. I say, you know, in this case, to monitor jobs after I filter it and after I do my inclusionary, exclusionary filters and all that good stuff, having the ability to export to PDF, CSV, or XML. But from that perspective, hopefully this helps in terms of understanding how you can improve your efficiencies in terms of managing jobs. And with that said, I'll go ahead and pass it back to you, Greg.
Great, thanks, Bullet. All right, there's a few questions. If people have other questions, feel free to use the question area. Just type in your question, and we'll just take them one by one. So the first question here that came in kind of early in the presentation, which is about, are there specific ports that need to be configured to be able to use the product? Anything going through a firewall or?
We have some ports that are tied to the dashboard for the web console itself. So the dashboard has some ports that they're advertised when you go through the installation to let you know what those would be, and you have the option of changing them. Other than the SQL ports themselves that we're using to communicate with SQL to pull this data, the answer would be no, unless you're talking about the web ports for the dashboard. Yeah.
Okay. All right, another question is, the data that's collected, is this stored in a database, or is it actually each server's hit each time when you pull the information?
No, we pull the data and we store it in a repository. So kind of going back to that, the PowerPoint that we were on, this is our repository here that we're keeping and maintaining what I call the metadata, if you will, associated to your jobs. So we do a polling against the instance from the collection service. Once that information has been collected, we populate it into our SQL Server database into the repository, which we utilize. And then you can control the retention of that data for each instance. You can say, you know, for this instance, I want to keep a month's worth of data. For the other instance that I add, I can keep maybe 5 days. It's up to you.
Okay. All right, another question here is just if somebody goes and modifies a job directly on one of the servers, how is that reflected in the tool?
So if you modify the job directly, we'll still see of it. Once we do the next collection, we'll identify and update the information in our database. So the next time you were to go out to see that instance or that job, you could go in and open it up and see the changes reflected in the job itself. So I don't know if we did that, but yeah, you can go in and open up the jobs and see them, and you can edit the jobs at any given time for jobs. And you can do that in our tool, obviously, but if you were to, for instance, go into the native area into, for example, you know, Management Studio and make a change to a job, it may take a minute or two, but to reflect that in the tool, once the collection has been performed, though, and it does it on a regular basis, whatever you specify, it's going to go out and then it'll update it in our repository, and then you would have that information available to you.
Okay. All right, here's another question that came in, and I'll just read it as it came in. It says, can the product be configured to check an FTP site for files available for download, or is this kind of where a Windows task would be used?
Well, I mean, you got to keep in mind, it's not really designed to go out to that, to do that. We can, you know, in terms of doing things like that, we can send out alerts via SMTP. We don't do anything with FTP specifically with this product, but that said, yeah, if you had Windows task events running and you wanted within that event to do something, then you can do whatever you want in that event, and then, you know, obviously this tool would help you in terms of understanding if it failed or was successful or not. The other thing I would just mention is that, you know, a lot of times people will judge things based off of a failed job, and if the job never starts or kicks off, that's always a challenge in the case of, in the standpoint of a missed run. So if you have a situation you wanted to alert on that, you could do some of that as well through this tool by saying, hey, this job, which was typically supposed to be scheduled to run at a certain time, didn't actually run, and if I wanted to know that, that would be something that would be really helpful. That's a little bit of off subject based on the question. I just remembered to kind of point that out though.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
All right. And
yeah.
just to add on to that question then, so somebody could just use the integration services package to do FTP, or use a PowerShell script to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. All right. Another question came in that's related to versions of SQL. Everything supported, or is there anything that's not supported?
Yeah, I should have mentioned that in the architecture slide. So we support everything from 2000 all the way up to 2016 with this product. So you know, any version of SQL that you got for the most part now. Obviously, with your Express versions and things like that that don't have the agent, it's not really going to do you much good if there's no jobs to monitor for those versions or editions of SQL. But yeah, for anything that has an agent or jobs associated to it, or Windows tasked events, in terms of operating systems, we can monitor that activity.
Okay. All right. Another question that's just related to the job history that's stored in SQL Server, and that just somebody just says they have a job that runs a lot, so the job history kind of disappears. Is there a way to configure how much history is saved?
Yes. So when you add it, now it's not specific to the job itself, but when you add that instance, one of the options that you have when you add the instance is how long you want to keep the data for. And so I think we showed you that, but let's just go again and show it again. Where we go out, when you add it, you can specify how long to keep the data for. Okay.
All right, so another question, again, I'll just read as it came in. It says, if I use the chaining concept, will the scheduler wait for SQL jobs to complete before executing the next step in the job?
Yes. Yeah, that's the beauty of it. So you basically tell it what the next step is, and then it won't do that next step until the first step is complete. And you have control over you know, a lot of those different things. And we didn't go into too much detail on it, but yeah, you can specify whether you want it to, as the second step, for example, to kick off 2 jobs, maybe simultaneously, and then on the third step, or I hate to use the word step, but on the third job within the chain, you know, you could say if it fails, run job A, and if it succeeds, run job B. You know, so you have some logic that you can apply to those job chains that make it really useful for you to have, if you will, flow charts of activity. And the idea is that as those flow charts, you know, you build them out, you're making your life a lot easier, plus you're making more efficient use of your time. Once again, because you're not having to guesstimate, if you will, you know, how long a job's going to run to know when to kick off the next job, so that you can give yourself enough buffer to wait for it to complete. And so that's definitely one of the value adds of this product.
Okay. All right. Another question that came in, and it's just related to maintenance processes. So somebody was asking if they have a maintenance job that they want to run on every single server, can they just create it in here and then deploy it to every single instance of SQL Server?
Yes, there's things you could do in terms of adding those instances and adding multiple targets that you could do that. So you would be able to do that. Now, one of the things that right now is not a capability but is coming down the pike is, you know, I showed you earlier how you can drag a job from one part of your calendar to another part of your calendar. Something that's coming down the pike in terms of the roadmap for this product is when you do that drag and drop, if you maybe wanted to move the job to another instance. So that's something that we're working on doing. It's not in this release, but yes, you would be able to create multiple job targets, if you will, for these when you create the job.
Okay. All right. Another question that came in is about somebody's using SQL Safe Backup, and they're just wondering, can these 2 products be used in conjunction?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, totally. In fact, a lot of the jobs that you see in my views that we were in earlier can be viewed. Now, you know, I think, I guess in terms of, you know, it's kind of a broad question to say, can they be used? If you start moving the jobs around in this tool for, let's just say, for example, a log backup and, you know, something along those lines, you would want to kind of think about how you're move those jobs around. It's not going to be intelligent if you're just dragging the job from one part of the calendar to another. It's not going to know to update the policy in SQL Safe if that's what they're asking. So you basically would create your policies in SQL Safe. Your policies will automatically create your jobs for you within SQL Safe, and then you would be able to centrally manage those jobs if you want to be alert on them as a whole within this tool. But the visibility part of it as well is also something that's obviously worth noting, because I could say, let me look at all of my backups that span across all of my instances, or anything with the word safe in it, for example. So you have a lot of, there's some different kind of use cases or value adds for each of the two products. But yeah, I would say in terms of this product being used with SQL Safe, if you're creating your policies, you'd want to create the policy with SQL Safe. You'd have visibility of the jobs, assuming that you're creating the policies with agent jobs, and you would be able to manage those jobs and see them and report against them and all those good things that we showed you.
All right, great. Well, that's the end of the questions. So thanks, Bullet, for all that awesome information. And as Bullet mentioned, don't forget to visit IDERA's website at www.idera.com to take a look at SQL Enterprise Job Manager, as well as all the other tools that IDERA offers. And while you're out there, there's a bunch of free tools too, so check those out as well. Thanks for attending, and have a great day.